the more you know, the more you are in possession of information. You know more, as if it were you carry more luggage. But this knowledge, on the other hand, the more you know, your luggage becomes smaller and smaller. And it has been said about the people of this knowledge that the knowledge of Allah is all contained in La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. It's all in there. And the knowledge for the elite is La ilaha illallah. For that is the message of the messenger. And it has been said also that the knowledge of the elite is La. As if it were in La, all the knowledge is contained. And what is the La directed to? The La is directed to all this. Knowledge is to say, La. And from La, to say, there is no God, there is no master in this world, is sealed with the words illallah. For to say there is no God, it doesn't sufficiently explain the no without knowing illallah. And you cannot know La ilaha illallah without knowing the messenger, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who brought us the message. And Tawheed is therefore not complete with La ilaha illallah. Tawheed is only complete with La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. We have said that knowing is not an affair of reason. In fact, reason exists, it has a function, but is limited. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, he says, you cannot understand me with reason. With all the words in the world, you cannot praise me. If you use all the trees as pens and all the oceans of ink, you cannot stop of praising my greatness. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, but the heart of the mu'minun contains me. And you have to be but bewildered with this expression. For you have to say, what is it that is within us that it can contain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How can that be possible? But it indicates quite clearly that there is a function within us that is far superior to the agencies and privileges given to us by reason. And therefore indicates that a civilization which is driven only by reason and denies everything else will be deficient. For it will be always superior, that group of people, that they affirm the heart and they expand the heart, for that is capable of knowing far, vast and deeper than reason can ever reach. But most particularly when it comes to the matter of Marifatullah. For it becomes very clear that reason is not capable of such an understanding, and therefore indicates that Marifatullah is an affair of the heart. It follows from here that Islam and Marifatullah cannot be defined within the constraints of logic and science. And therefore we can affirm that we, in Islam, we don't have a theology. For we do not attempt, let alone try, to understand Allah with reason, not with logos. Logos means a statement in Greek. There's no amount of understanding, of reasoning, of talking that is going to make us understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, what is before us is the fact that in order to understand Marifatullah, we have to use a different tool. And this is the tool of the heart. The heart, as I said before, it has two dynamics, love and fear. And therefore, it is using these two tools that we can reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by love. And what is to love? Love is not a rational matter. You cannot rationally love anything. You cannot rationally not love anything. Try to tell somebody who is in love, please don't love this or the other, only just to create the opposite reaction. Love. And when people come to the shuyukh and they say, but how do I love? I want to love Allah, but how do I love? And the Shaykh of the Shaykh of the Shaykh of my Shaykh, Muli al-Arabi Darkawi, who lived in North Africa, and it is through him, who left 100,000 murids, that the Islam of North Africa is different than anywhere else, and still there is traces of tasawwuf left. Through this remarkable wali of Allah that he told us in one of the letters, and somebody came to him with this same request, how do I love Allah? He responded, love Allah. Just love Him. Stop thinking. How do you love? Love Him. Like you drink a glass of water. If you had to look at the glass of water and you have to calculate how many centimeters I have to bring it back and what degree I have to move it and bring it forward to me. If I do this calculation properly, I throw the water on my shoulders. I just drink it. Stop thinking. Just love Him. Love Him. Use your heart until you fall in love with Him. But like he said, but if you can't, if you're so helpless that you can't, he said, pretend that you love Him and mention His name, he says, every minute for 3 days. For surely Allah by His mercy will open your heart. And this is how you reach Allah. With love and with fear. With hope and fear. Not only with hope, not only with love, but also with fear. And again, how do you fear Allah? Fear Allah. For indeed there is nothing in the world worth of His fear other than Him. Like Rumi said, be aware of what you fear, because what you fear is what you worship. And you have to stand still for a minute and scan your heart and see what is in your heart. For what you fear is what you worship. and remove any traces of anything else, for it is being said, Allah is a jealous Lord. He doesn't want anybody else beside him. So remove anything from your heart, for you cannot have two masters. If you want to welcome Allah in your heart, remove everything else. And this is the process of love and fear that moves you into the path, and it brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's from here that you start to know. And from knowing, you acquire certainty. Uncertainty is witnessing. Uncertainty is what drives you to act. You remember earlier when I put this sinister example of some familiar of ours being raped outside. But everybody can recognize that there are many aspects of our affairs with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon which we behave exactly in that way. And we don't want to look at it, and we don't want to act upon it. Witnessing is the fact that you are not longer involved into the affairs as a distant observer, as if somebody who is looking from a window, from outside to inside, into your own reality, but you realize that you are in the middle of it. That all this thing is about you. That love of Allah is about you. That the heart, and when we talk about the heart, you are your own laboratory. That the experiment is upon you. That you are the matter of investigation. That Allah doesn't change with our worship. He doesn't need it. He doesn't become bigger. He doesn't become smaller when we worship Him. That is us, that they are the beneficiaries. It is for us to love Him, and it is for us to fear Him. And from here, we move to the fundamental matter of how to deal with the heart. The management of the heart. Now the Sufis don't say, and this is very important that you understand, they don't say, follow your heart. This is an expression that you hear everywhere today. And people advising each other, do whatever your heart tells you. The Sufis will never tell you that. For to ask a person who's seeking his heart to follow his heart is to ask him to commit suicide, to hit himself against the wall. The Sufis don't say follow your heart. The Sufis, they say manage your heart, polish your heart, improve your heart, clean your heart, etc. Similar expressions, all of which denote that the heart is something that it can get better, that there is from an initial condition of sickness, of turbidity, as the Sufis say, you can arrive to a state of clearness, of clarity, of non-turbidity, of peace, of transparency. And it is in that condition that then the light of Allah will reflect purely upon you. And it's in that condition that knowledge of Allah becomes more perfect. Now, this affair of management of the heart is the heart of tasawwuf. This is why the people choose somebody to help them in the path. It is for this reason that there is structures and there is tariqas and there are different schools on this matter, all of which they go to the same spot. All the tariqas, they have the same common denominator, is knowledge of Allah, marifatullah. There are various ways of reaching there. And different traditions have focused on different aspects of this magnificent, vast affair. They have reached different ways and different paths. Again, I insist, all towards the same goal. And you have heard of some of these words in the past, perhaps others better than some other than you here in the group. It's the word suluk. Suluk, it is at the heart of this affair. You cannot clean the heart without being involved in the world. In other words, this is an affair that you cannot just do in isolation, as if it were totally detached from the world. But in fact, what suluk indicates is that this is very much attached to what you do in the world. And the expression that best affirms and defines this idea of suluk is the fundamental principle of the tariqas, by which they say the hakika and the sharia go together. The meaning of this is you cannot attain a cleansing of your heart and to aspire to an spiritual elevation without struggling to fulfill the commands that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. In other words, this is to negate the charlatans that are out there saying that you can become Sufi and you don't need the Sharia. In fact, some people say you don't even need to become a Muslim. And some people say, we are so elevated already, we don't need the prayers. And we don't need the fasting. We already passed that level. We are already in communion. These are charlatans. These are liars. For it is impossible to attain knowledge of Allah and to attain a spiritual growth without manifesting your knowledge upon the Sharia. In fact, the Sufi takes the argument and turns it upside down. And he said, you have to become a master of the Sharia. Not just doing it well, but to do it perfectly. And the way of understanding this is not by doing more good things, but by doing the most important things first. The meaning of this is what Shaykh Darqawi again, quoting him again, he said, start for the difficult things. Start fulfilling the difficult things, and then you do the smaller things. What is indicated by this is that you cannot take the Sharia and do the things that they are easy for you to fulfill and ignore the things that they are difficult for you to fulfill. For the benefit is hidden in the things that they are difficult, you find difficult to do. So it's not how many things you do, as if, I've done everything, but except riba. Riba is difficult. It's extremely difficult. This is where the benefit is. This other thing is, I can do these other things, but look, I do charity, I do this and do that, I clean my thing, I do. It's not a list of things, how many you do and how you don't. It's to understand the things, the time that you're living in. And to fulfill those things that they are difficult for, there is the benefit for you. So somebody who says, I'm a Sufi, and he says everything right, but then he says, and Islamic banks are great. He's not just making a mistake, as if it were, okay, 99 he passed, but one he missed. No, he has failed altogether. For the matters of the world do not stand before you like a quiz upon which you have to say tick correctly or incorrectly. The matters of the world come to you alive. If you are in a house and there is a fire in the house and you realize my family will die and I will die, you do not start painting the windows. But the windows need to be painted. You do not start painting the windows when the house is in fire. Because not only is a waste of time, you will die and the paint will be consumed. Is that any chance you had of stopping the fire has disappeared because you are busy painting the window. You are a murderer of yourself and your family. If you can understand this, then you can understand that the things in the Sharia have different weight. That when Allah has declared war on riba and the whole world has fallen prey of this insidious religion called capitalism, you cannot simply say, I will do everything else and I will ignore this matter. If you look at the discourse today, anywhere you want, east or west, listen to what it is to be said. How much is said about the Palestinian revolt? And how little is said about riba? How much is said about anything else? How carefully the whole matter of riba is put under the carpet. When it's mentioned, nobody fails to say, but it's haram. But then you move on. There's no solution. There's no attempt to do anything about it. As if we were just done by it, consumed by it, helplessly surrender to it. Allah has declared war on riba. Never mind. They will discuss about the benefits of reciting Quran during the month of Ramadan. We will go on this matter, this topic forever. How about understanding what is being read in the Quran during the month of Ramadan and any other time? How about fulfilling the ayats of Quran? The benefit of the scarf, the hijab. I mean, how many times do we have to hear that? How many times we have to hear, especially in the West, that this girl in such a school was not allowed because the scarf was this and that, and then it's followed by an argument that is echoed throughout the world by everybody who has something to say on the subject. And this thing occupies the man. The Malalas of the world, this event here and there, everything except riba. And then when you dig a little bit deeper into this and you find that they have no understanding on the matter, you realize, as we will see later, that the people don't know what riba is anymore. Now, those of you who know me, I have spent the last 2 years in Pakistan. Those who have been with me in Pakistan, they are witness because they have participated in some of the talks that I have been teaching the ulama of Pakistan what riba is. I've been there 2 years. I have been the most important ulama in the country. Only one out of perhaps 200 was capable of giving me a classical definition of riba. The majority, they said interest. They had no idea on the subject. This is the extent of which this matter of riba has been hidden. This is the extent of which the whole matter of the importance of the Sharia is being hidden. And how it is now we are presented with, you do whatever you can as an argument. This is not Sufism. You don't know whatever you can. Nobody's asked you to do whatever you can. You are asked to submit. In other words, I don't care whether you understand it or not. I have asked you to obey me. And what I promise is that if you obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would say, Allah will convey knowledge to you. In the doing it, not before. You submit to Allah, and then Allah teaches you what riba is. Allah put in your heart what you need to understand. You act first. You submit. For doing what I can is going at the same speed of your ignorance. It is in tawakkal that the opening takes place. And what is tawakkal? Tawakkal is to rely upon Allah. When you find yourself that this is impossible, I cannot fight the banks. You can indeed, you cannot fight the banks. And if our religion was called do what you can religion, then it will stop right there. But it's called Islam, which doesn't mean peace. That's salam. It means submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So because my religion means submission, and Allah has said, this is forbidden, I act. And in that acting, I know. And here again, we have something about knowledge of Allah. Knowledge of Allah, that it doesn't derive from the mere meditation. You need to act. And with the acting, it comes knowledge. And with the knowledge comes more opening to act even further. As if it were you're walking with 2 foots. One is knowing and another is acting upon what you know. And acting upon what you know leading you to more knowledge upon which you act, and so on and so on and so on. So you need these 2 dynamics to work together. Hakika and Sharia are together. And whoever wants to separate these 2, he is a deviator of the deen. For this thing, they operate in simultaneity and they cannot be diversed. In fact, again, the Sufis go and take this matter farther. In this relationship, they see more than what is ordinary. And they see it is precisely in the knowledge of Allah that you can understand the Sharia. It is precisely in the acting of the Sharia that you can understand the Hakika. In acting, fi sabilillah, in the one that gives everything in the face of Allah, he has attained more knowledge than anybody can do just doing dhikr for the rest of their life. The Shaheed, who dies fighting fi sabilillah in the jihad rightly called by the rightful leaders in the establishment of Dar al-Islam, something we don't have today. But when the call of jihad is given, and the man gives his life and his position and indeed all his attributes for the sake of Allah, that man will be buried without ghusl. He doesn't need ghusl, for he has attained everything that every Sufi would try to attain. He is clearer. He has attained a status that a lifetime full of dhikr every night you cannot attain. You still need a ghusl. But not the shaheed. And that tells you something about action. And equally, without knowledge of Allah, you will find the Sharia speaking to you in a language of your self-convenience. What you can do, what is practical. Without submission, without fear of Allah, without love of Allah. The Sharia speaks to you the way you want to hear. So some people, for some strange reason that I cannot quite understand, they can read, they can look into the Quran, they can look into the Fiqh and the Hadith, and they can see dinar and dirham and read US dollars. They can read the word souk and read Tesco and malls, Wanutama. They can read in riba is haram and read central banks and IMF. They can read into it is haram to pay zakat with debt, and they say except paper money. I cannot see how they do it, but they do it. It was one of my first visits to Malaysia that I was invited by a friend of ours, Abdurrahman Sharif, to address a congregation in the Johor State Development Corporation. And I was giving a lecture as the young author of a book called The End of Economics in the Johor State Development Corporation, which is familiar to you, a very successful company down in the south. And I was speaking for the first time in Malaysia in public, or it was the first or the second time I had spoken publicly. And so in a certain way, very naive, without really understanding what was going on here. And so I quite, I said, like, for example, Islamic banking is haram. That's a ridiculous idea. And I think it was the first time anybody had ever said Islamic banking is haram in Malaysia. And so there was a little disconcerted in the audience. And so I realized I had to explain it a little bit further. I said, well, it is haram. This is an absurd idea. And I think they were all engineers, and I brought the matter forward and explained to them, as we will do it during this course in the next few days. We'll go into the details of this argument. But when I did, the Mufti of Johor, everybody was waiting there. I concluded the story, and I realized that there was some important person there, and everybody was asking, he has to say something. I mean, this man is saying Islamic bank is haram. So there was the Mufti there, and I remember he stood up, and he looked at my eyes, and with a big smile, he said, "My dear friend, of course you don't know." He spoke to me with this condescending tone. "Of course you don't know. Islamic banking was invented at the time of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam," he said to me, with a big smile, like saying, "You poor fellow, you don't know anything about the deen." When Khadija, he spoke slowly like this, gave the first money in Kirat to Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that was the bank. He sat down, concluding the argument. I was stunned. That's how they do it. That's exactly how it happened. That is a bank. Kirat is a bank. For the same argument, the gold dinar is a US dollar. And you can carry on. You can say, and this is Islamic insurance, and that's the stock exchange. I want to find out where they found it, but I'm sure there is somewhere. If they cannot find it, they invent an Arabic word. You know, something that sounds al-hawla al-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, that's fine. Then you say, that is futures in Islam. Futures. They find it very hard to justify that there will be futures in those days, but an Arabic word will do the job just as well. You don't find the hadith, you invent the word. Do you think I'm kidding? Just go on, read the literature on Islamic bank. So, the question behind this is knowledge. What is at issue here is knowledge. If you don't have taqwa, you can see whatever you like. You will be at the mercy of your own practical necessity. You will impose upon the thing that you are reading your own needs. Your nerves will be all over reading in that pages. You are reading the Quran, but you are reading yourself. You are looking at the fiqh, but you are looking for whatever you want to look. This is what I say today to these Islamic bankers when I talk to them. That you are doing not hadith, but halal is hadith self-service. You just pick up the things that you like, you ignore the things that you don't like, you take half of this and 3/4 of the other, mix it all together, rinse it, and then you come with an Islamic principle and then you apply. I can Islamize anything you like with that. You tell me. Whiskey, I give you Islamic whiskey. In no time. Just let me use the methodology the way you do. Because surely there must be something good in whiskey. There must be something. You know, a protein, a this, something that goes down to the heart, and then I have to say, well, since Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, anything good for your health is good for you, the principle of looking for good things in food, and this thing has something good, there you are, Islamic whiskey. It doesn't take much longer than that. Now, is that knowledge? No, that's not knowledge. That's mockery of the deen. It's ridiculous, it's absurd. It doesn't follow any principle of ijtihad, any of the rules, not trying to understand whether we have an institution that already exists. Before you speak about US dollar or Islamizing the US dollar or creating the Islamic ringgit, you have to say, what is the currency in Islam? What is the model? Do we have a model? Didn't have any model, as somebody has suggested? The British came and they told us, you have no history. We have come here to civilize you. La mission civilisatrice. They have come here to give us. You were primitive, natives, completely ignorant, and we came with the light. And some people thought, yeah, that's right. We didn't have anything. We didn't have economy. We didn't have politics. We didn't have any understanding of anything. Thanks until democracy came, and you came with the banks, we had no idea about anything, in fact. Thank you. I mean, if you can buy that story, then of course I have nothing more to say to you. But if you are under the impression that we did exist before they came, and we did in fact develop a system that it was more just and supreme than anything the world had ever seen before, then you have to agree that we have a history and that there is a model of Islam, and they cannot teach us about trading because we taught them about trading. They were the ones living in the caves. We taught the West what a marketplace is. In the days that they didn't even know what money was. Go and look what it was Europe in the low Middle Ages. They didn't even have money. They didn't have property. There was these feudal lords exchanging food. Carloman didn't have money. When the Muslims of Al-Andalus came, they created money. They saw this is how it works. And we created markets. And the people were freed and they ran from the Christians to join in our cities because they could be free. Because they didn't have to serve to somebody else. We taught them about trading. They had no idea what it was. They took it, perverted it, and threw it back to us in the name of riba. So, you need knowledge of Allah in order to encounter the Sharia. Before you read the text, you need taqwa. It is the condition upon which you will be able to understand the Sharia. If you don't have taqwa, you cannot think. You cannot think. Now, this matter has been, it leads us immediately to the next topic, which is thinking and his knowledge of the world. Not that I have said even 1/10 of what is required to discuss this matter of Marifatullah, you would understand that. I only want to outline to you just the very mere essence of this is something that you have to look upon. And this is something very important indeed for all of you, and that without knowledge of Allah, you cannot understand the Sharia. That's enough for me. But then I want to bring the matter to what it is that we understand about this world and how do we encounter it. And I want to bring this matter from a perspective that perhaps is a little bit strange to you, but very easy to understand. And I'm referring to a man born in Germany called Martin Heidegger. This man is the most important of all the philosophers in the West because he's the man who said, science doesn't think. He said, he declared the end of philosophy. Now you probably have a superficial understanding of the matter of philosophy, unless perhaps there's somebody of you who have read this matter in great depth. But as for the majority of the people, they think of philosophy, think of something abstract and like something metaphysical, they will say. Philosophy is the way we educate our children. Philosophy is the Constitution. Philosophy is Malaysia. It's the rational system that you operate. It's the technical system under which you live. It's wawasan duapolo. Philosophy is the way of thinking of the West. It's a way of thinking that is everywhere now. It's the philosophy of rationalism, among other things. Heidegger said, all this comes from one singular problem. He called it the forgetfulness of being. What is being, he said? Being, which it doesn't have a what we can say is one, and is not one entity. The West could not think the truth. The way of thinking that it has developed, known as philosophy, which originated from Plato, from the ancient Greeks, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates before him, but he didn't write. So that's why people say Plato is the first. That way of thinking, which Heidegger calls a fashion of thinking, that fashion of thinking originated by the Greeks, extended west, and it became the way of thinking of the West. And he said it concluded with Nietzsche. Nietzsche was the last philosopher. That's it. He brought the whole thing to absurdity, nihilism. He said this is absurd, it doesn't make sense. It's just a lot of nonsense. Just talking without knowing anything. The values have no meaning. The words have no meaning anymore. They have no root. And Heidegger is very complex. Lots of beautiful things to understand. If you are a Sufi, it's very easy to understand Heidegger. If you are not a Sufi, it's practically incomprehensible. That's why many of the people in the West, they say, we cannot understand Heidegger. Quite naturally, they can't. But Sufism will understand it, because some of the codes are very simple to understand. When he says that truth, before philosophy came, was known as aletheia. Aletheia is a Greek word. Before the philosophers came in, before Plato, there were not philosophers, logically. Who were they? The thinkers were poets. They were poets. They wrote and they referred to the world and they tried to explain the world in metaphors. What comes with Plato is trying to define the world. They had fascinated with the world. No metaphors are needed anymore. What we can define precisely with logos. We can reach the truth. The poets, they say you can't reach the truth. The truth is unreachable. They say, no, we can make the truth. If a statement, they say, can be proven to be correct against the data that is displayed. Let's say, for example, this bottle has 500 milligrams of water, and I can prove that the statement is correct, then I will say, and this is the tricky thing, that is true. Now you say this thing all the time, and it doesn't occur to you, this is kafir. And you will not even take it that way, because you will say, no, I don't mean that. But you mean exactly that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Haq min rabbika. The truth comes from your Lord. There's no any other source. This way of speaking, we say this is true. This is the linguistic development of Western culture, of this way of thinking we call philosophy. We don't say in Arabic, if you notice, and I'm sure in Malay it's the same, you don't say, you say an statement and you say, that is haq. You don't say that. You say sahih. Sahih. So in other words, you say, that statement is correct. What philosophy does, it transforms a system of, a theorem of relationship between a sentence and the object from a theory of correspondence, which is just a correspondence, into the truth, making of the truth. Now, you can see the jump, metaphysical jump, if you want to call it, that there is between this sentence is correct and this sentence is the truth. Do you follow? Because when you do that, then you are putting an absolute over something, the nature of which is just a sentence. The only thing that you are stating is this thing happens and that's it. Let's say, for example, I take, an object and I drop it into the floor. Okay, if I just extend my hand, I'm not going to do it. It will fall. No. It will fall naturally. Okay? But I don't need to say that is true. To speak about the truth, I'm speaking about Allah. It's one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm referring to something that extends way beyond my experimentation. But I can say this experiment, if repeated and ever again, most of the times will fall. Okay? If I say the gravity is this and this and this, most of the time it will be applicable. In the days of Newton, we didn't know what we know today, that gravity actually is not a constant, that actually changes. Okay? So that which was true then is not true now. Of course, we knew that. I mean, science was demonstrating, even though they don't want to admit it, but that was science too, that the Earth was at the center of the universe. They had mathematical proofs. Then science again, not religion and then science came in. Science disproved itself by saying, no. It is the sun at the center and then we go further, and so on. And now we are just a remote dot inside the galaxy that is part of the galaxies, inside clusters of galaxies, inside universe, and some people are arguing now, and there are several universes as well. And then probably there will be clusters of universe and God knows where. But it's a delusion. It's a delusion. Now, if you submit that the argument of saying something is true is already opening the door to something really complex and metaphysically incorrect, then you can see how science could advance and can become even further delusional in the process. So when it comes to, for example, defining just something as simple as is this thing going to fall or not, you may argue that, well, okay, there is science and that, but that's not a big deal. But if I, for example, put a complex affair, like, for example, a ball and a roulette like in a casino. Okay, you throw the ball in the opposite direction, you make the roulette go in circles. Certainly, from the moment the ball leaves the operator, you could, if you have enough information, determine where the ball is going to come, is going to fall. All you need is to know a lot more than just the information that we have. From the point of view of me as an observer, there's no way I can determine that. I cannot do that quick calculation of hand, speed, all the different dots in the wood that they will affect the speed, the friction, etc., etc. If I could, let's say, for example, if I had a computer with that kind of intelligence, then I will be able to determine it. And therefore, well, I've done like a miracle, right? So I'm entitled then to call it the truth. But it's still not the truth. Still is an experiment. The only thing that I can say about that fascinating, magical finding is that if I repeat that exactly in the same conditions, the same person at the same time, this thing is going to happen. Nothing more. I cannot conclude anything about the truth. I don't say anything about the truth. Because the truth cannot be explained with words. Like the people before Socrates admitted. The way we relate to the truth, like pre-Socratic poets affirm, is through, they call it, unclosing, disclosing. As if it were the truth lies there before us, manifesting continuously. We find ourselves in the process of having to unveil. Now this unveiling is a Sufi word. Heidegger doesn't know about that. He calls it in undisclosure, aletheia, something which is enclosed and unenclosed. The Sufis that would say unveiling. Knowledge is unveiling. So in other words, knowledge is, I don't make the truth. I cannot write an statement and say that's the truth. What we say about the truth is that through the process of unveiling, I reach the truth. Unveiling is to this strip all my fears, strip all my attributes, and then Allah will shine upon me, as it does continuously, is to remove my kufr. The opposite of unveiling is veiling, which is to cover yourself. Knowledge is uncovering. So in this we are in agreement with the language of the poets before Socrates. In this we're in total disagreement with the science that evolved immediately after that. And Heidegger, through a process that starting from here goes and goes and goes and goes in dismantling the nonsensical nature of rationalism, he ends up with the sentence, and science doesn't think. Now I want you to go to the next university in Malaysia, you go to International Islamic University and tell them, science doesn't think, and watch their faces. Because if science doesn't think, what was and Duapolo? Why what was and Duapolo has to become like Britain? Why what was and Duapolo is to become like Medina al-Munawwara at the time of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Why what was and Duapolo is not to become more Malay than we were, to enhance our attributes, to bring our knowledge, to bring taqwa to shine on all over the world? Why what was and Duapolo is not that? Why do we have to follow an economic system, to have the inflation rate, to have the national debt, to have the mad industrialization that we are creating, to enslave our own people for the sake of an economic system we did not understand in the first place? Where is the madness coming from? Of course, this is always corrected by somebody who says, what do you want us to live in the jungle again? And this is how the West is so brilliant. I mean, you have to give them credit. They fool the whole world, okay? The British, you want to strangle them. Sorry for all of you. I don't mean all of the British. I mean the British Empire of the old days. Terrible. But on the other hand, you have to salute them. I mean, they did conquer a country of 20 million people with 40,000 soldiers. Now, you can say the British are this or the other, but where do we stand in that? What happened to us? Their genius is that they can turn everything upside down. They are masters of disguise. And they have sold capitalism. The crime of mankind is not that just the Muslims say riba is haram. The Christians said it. Now they've forgotten. Now they have all become Islamic banking Protestants. They have Christian banks now. They don't need to say Christian banks because it's Christian anyway. As if we leave our guys here in a few years' time, you don't need to say Islamic banking, it's just banking. The genius of that is that they were capable of giving to riba all the attributes, all the good characteristics of technology. Things that technology has done, they say, no, this is because of capitalism. And they have put to industry and technology all the bad things that capitalism has to offer. So the people say, no, technology is bad. Technology have done that. No, it's the capitalism under which this technology was developed, or only allowed to develop, that created this madness. I'm referring to the chaotic nature of the almost total destruction of the world, if we let them continue for a little bit further, of this mad technological development. Gas emissions, poison on the waters, poison on the air, poison of ourselves, the use of all kind of chemicals in our food, our chicken, our halal chicken, which is not halal at all, and etc., 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 all in the names of technology. But surprisingly, always, this is the same. Capitalism is free from the danger of discussion. It is this technology that has to be blamed. No, riba is bad. The development that we did in terms of the use of the transformation, the harvesting of energy through the natural processes of fire and essentially fire and later on the things that we physically discovered about the movement of things, etc. How to harvest the energy of the world. That has allowed us to eliminate an enormous amount of labor. Undoubtedly capable of manufacturing things that it would have taken 1,000 people with 3 men. And therefore capable of developing and transforming things at a much farther speed. The idea that technology could only occur thanks to capitalism is preposterous. For it is very clear that we had technology before capitalism came. The only thing they did is that they changed the ownership of this technology, instead of being owned by the community in the form of guilds, to be owned by individuals. To transform a system whereby the whole community will grow with, into a system where there will be one owner and 14,000 employees. The argument is the opposite. It can be proven that technology, that capitalism has stopped the development of technology. It has stopped the development of certain technologies. Why don't you have electrical cars in the streets? They are cheaper, they are easier to manufacture. You don't require this large capital, these factories to produce them. They can consume 1/3 of what we consume today. They don't pollute. You can bring them in the streets. Why? They didn't want to. They could have done it. There are technologies that they are not allowed to be developed simply because they don't make money. We are in their traps. The pharmaceutical industry is a scandal. Producing medicines that they only are to fit the self-defined illnesses that they also define. It's like they make the illness and then 2 days later they have the medicine for it. And we are here buying, we don't know what we are buying. The scandal of a science which is driven by profit. Not just the banks, just pure profit. In fin. What was on Dopolo should be whatever we want it to be. But with the wisdom of Allah, we don't have to throw Islam in the process. What was on Dopolo, whatever is that Nusantara is going to be in the future, it has to be on the basis of Islam first, not last, not second. Islam is at the very front of whatever we want to do. Reason, and this is my concluding statement, is not the best tool that we have to know about the world. It is a deception to say that reason is everything, that everything that reason can bring us the truth. We have arguments within the very foundations of their own science that suggests that this thing is not what it sounds. Reason is not to be denied. Reason is simply limited. That's what we say. What we say is that those who make reason absolute, they're deviators. Reason stands as a tool to help us to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But reason doesn't have the authority, the capacity, the means to define the truth. Allah doesn't have a what, a where, or a how. Asking what, where, how will give us comparisons in the world that they are useful, but still not the truth. Whatever you answer in what is Allah, that's not Allah. If somebody asks us, who is Allah? Our answer is not applicable. But if somebody answers, and sufficiently answers, that somebody can say, and that is logic, you have created a theology. You have succeeded in transforming, reducing God to a concept. But it doesn't mean you are talking about God, Allah, you're talking about a theogod that you have created. You carry on thinking about him. You can say tons of things, but you are not speaking about Allah. just speaking about your own thoughts. We don't have theology, meaning we are not atheistic, we are not theistic, we are not monotheistic, we are not polytheistic, we are not theistic in the first place. We don't have a concept of Allah, we have an experience of Allah. We have witnessing of Allah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. It is from there that knowledge of Allah arises, and it's from there, from these foundations, that we will now undertake the fabulous exploration of the most important aspects of the Sharia and they will define our society in terms of its problems and what the solutions are, with elegance, with clarity, without any question, without any doubt, without having to enter into any controversy, just simply going through the headlines of what the Sharia implies, what defines in terms of history and the amal of the people before us. And with that, we intend to bring this matter forward not just for our sake and recreation. We want to bring this matter forward in order to outline to us and the whole world a path of reconstruction. How do we today, we can use this knowledge in order to bring about the formation of a new Dar al-Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.